Aelith didn't know that Alpha King had been hunting for her for 6 months. She didn't know that every rumor, every whispered tale of a woman who could see death before it arrived, had led him here, to this rotting prison at the edge of the marshlands. And she certainly didn't know that when the iron door of her cell swung open, her life of chains and silence would shatter into something far more dangerous than captivity. All she knew was that today was Pardon Day. Once a year, the Alpha King traveled to the 4 great prisons of Valdran and released those he deemed worthy of mercy. Aelith had watched it happen twice before from behind her bars, prisoners weeping with joy, falling to their knees, stumbling into the gray light of freedom while she remained in the dark. She never expected her name to be called. Murderers could be pardoned. Thieves could be pardoned. But a woman accused of witchcraft, of seeing a man's death and speaking it aloud? She was the thing mothers warned their children about. She was bad luck given flesh. The Ashenmire prison groaned around her, ancient stones sweating with moisture that never dried. 3 years in this place had taught Aelith to count time by the dripping of water, by the changing smell of rot, by the slow erosion of hope. Her cell was 8 steps wide and 6 steps deep. She knew every crack, every stain, and every scratch left by prisoners who came before. Today, the corridor echoed with footsteps, not the shuffling gait of the guards, but something different. Measured, purposeful, powerful. Voices drifted toward her, names being called, cell doors shrieking open, cries of disbelief and gratitude. The procession was moving closer. Aelith pressed herself against the far wall, her heart a trapped bird beneath her ribs. She wouldn't hope. Hope was a cruelty she'd abandoned long ago. Then the footsteps stopped. Right outside her door. The viewing slot scraped open, and a pair of eyes found hers through the darkness, pale gray, sharp as winter frost, and carrying a weight that made her breath catch. A voice followed. Low, rough, commanding. This one stays. The cell door screamed on its hinges as it swung inward. Aelith didn't move. Couldn't move. The man who stepped through the doorway seemed to swallow the dim light, his presence filling the cramped space until the walls themselves felt like they were leaning away from him. He was tall, taller than anyone she'd seen in 3 years of guards and wardens. Dark hair fell past his collar, pushed back from a face that looked carved from stone and shadow. A scar traced the line of his jaw, pale against sun-darkened skin. He wore black leather and a heavy cloak clasped with silver, but no crown. He didn't need one. Authority radiated from him like heat from a forge. Behind him, a guard hovered nervously. "Your Majesty, this prisoner is... Leave us." 2 words. The guard vanished. The door groaned shut, and Aelith was alone with the Alpha King of Valdran. She'd heard stories about Theron Valdric. Everyone had. The boy prince who'd watched his father die in a border war and took the throne at 19 with blood still wet on his hands. The king who'd united the fractured pacts through sheer force of will, who crushed rebellions before they could breathe, who was said to be more wolf than man even in his human skin. They said he could smell fear. Aelith forced herself to stand straight, though her legs trembled beneath her filthy shift. She met his gaze because looking away felt like surrender, and she'd surrendered enough in this place. Those gray eyes studied her, not with disgust or pity, but with something sharper. Assessment. Calculation. Like she was a puzzle he was trying to solve. "You're smaller than I expected," he said. "You're ruder than I expected." The words escaped before she could stop them. 3 years of silence, and that was what her mouth chose to offer the most powerful man in the kingdom. Something flickered across his face. Surprise, maybe, or amusement. It was gone before she could name it. "They said you were bold." He took a step closer, and she caught his scent. Pine and wood smoke and something wild beneath. "They also said you were mad. That you see things that aren't there." "I see things that haven't happened yet," Aelith corrected, her voice steadier than she felt. "There's a difference." "Is there?" He circled her slowly, and she felt like prey, like something small and soft caught in the open with nowhere to run. But she didn't cower. She'd learned long ago that cowering only made predators hungrier. "Why am I still here?" she demanded. "Everyone else walked free. Why not me?" Theron stopped in front of her, close enough that she could see the flecks of silver in his eyes, the tension in his jaw, the shadows beneath his lashes that spoke of sleepless nights. "Because I didn't come here to pardon prisoners, Aelith." Her name in his mouth sent a strange shiver down her spine. "I came here for you." "Why?" He reached into his coat and withdrew something small, a leather cord holding a ring, simple gold, scratched and worn. He held it up, letting it catch the faint light. "Because in 6 months, 11 people in my court have died. My advisors, my allies, my friends." His voice was ice wrapped in velvet. "And I need to know who is next." Aelith's blood turned cold. 11 deaths. Not accidents, not illness. She could hear it in the way he said the word. 11 murders wearing innocent masks. "And you think I can help you?" she said slowly. "Why?" "Because of the stories? Because of the truth." Theron tucked the ring away, his eyes never leaving hers. 3 years ago, you attended the harvest feast at Lord Brennick's estate. You looked into his eyes and screamed that he would die before midnight, choked on poison poured by his own wife. He paused. "He died exactly as you described, exactly as you saw." Aelith flinched. She'd spent 3 years trying to bury that memory, and here he was, ripping it open like a fresh wound. "I didn't kill him. I know." Those 2 words struck her harder than any accusation. She stared at him, searching for the lie, the trap. "Then why am I still in chains?" "Because Lady Brennick was very convincing, because people fear what they don't understand, and because no one with power cared enough to look deeper." A shadow crossed his expression, not quite guilt, but close. "Until now." Aelith's throat tightened. She thought of her mother, who had the same gift, the same curse, who had seen death in a neighbor's eyes and whispered a warning, only to watch him die of fever 3 days later. They'd burned her mother alive when Aelith was 12, called her a witch, called her an abomination. Aelith had learned to hide after that, to never meet anyone's gaze for too long, to never speak of what she saw. She'd been so careful. Until Lord Brennick. Until his death was so violent, so vivid, that the scream had torn from her before she could swallow it. "How did you find me?" she whispered. "Your father." The world tilted. "My father is dead." "He is." Theron's voice softened, just slightly. "But before he died, he sent letters to people who trade in secrets. He wanted to ensure that if you ever needed protection, someone would know where to find you." He paused. "He loved you very much." Aelith's vision blurred. Her father had died 2 years into her imprisonment. A sickness that took him quickly, the guards had said. She'd never been allowed to say goodbye, never known that in his final days, he'd been fighting for her in the only way he could. "I don't..." Her voice cracked. She pressed her palm to the cold wall, steadying herself. "I don't understand what you want from me." "I want you to look at them." Theron stepped closer, and this time, she didn't flinch. "My council, my court, every person who has access to my inner circle. I want you to look into their eyes and tell me what you see. And if I see death, then we stop it." "You can't stop death, it doesn't work like that." "You stopped Lord Brennick's wife from getting away with murder." His gaze bore into her. "Your warning might not have saved him, but it named his killer. The only reason she escaped justice is because the court chose not to believe you." He let that settle. "I believe you." Before we continue, please take 2 seconds to like this video. Aelith felt the weight of those words wrap around her like chains far heavier than iron. He believed her. The Alpha King of Valdren believed her. It was the thing she'd wanted for 3 years, The thing she'd stopped daring to want. And if I refuse? Theron didn't threaten, didn't growl or posture. He simply looked at her with those winter-pale eyes and said, "Then more people die. Maybe people who don't deserve it. Maybe people I love." A muscle feathered in his jaw. Maybe me. Would that be such a loss? The defiance was reflex, armor she couldn't quite shed. His smile was thin, humorless. "Ask me again in a week." Aelith stared at him, a king who believed her, a mystery that reeked of blood and conspiracy, a chance to leave this cell and use the gift that had destroyed her life. "If I help you," she said carefully, "what happens to me when it's done?" Theron held her gaze. "That depends entirely on what we find." The silence stretched between them, thick and suffocating. Aelith's mind raced through every possibility, every trap this could be. Kings didn't come to prisons for accused witches. Kings didn't believe women who saw death in people's eyes. There had to be an angle, a trick, something she wasn't seeing. "What are your terms?" she finally asked. Theron's eyebrow rose slightly. "You're negotiating?" "I'm clarifying. There's a difference." She threw his own words back at him. "I've spent 3 years learning that nothing comes without a price. So what's mine?" For a long moment he simply looked at her. Then his gaze changed. Respect. Maybe. Grudging and small. 14 days, he said. "You'll have access to my court, my council, my inner circle. You'll attend every gathering, every meal, every meeting I deem necessary. You look at everyone I tell you to look at, and you tell me exactly what you see. No hesitation, no lies. And in return, your freedom. Full pardon, signed and sealed. Enough gold to start over wherever you choose." He paused. "And your name cleared. Publicly, I'll make sure everyone knows you were wrongly imprisoned." Aelith's heart stuttered. Her name cleared. Not just freedom, but redemption. The chance to walk through the world without whispers following her like shadows. It was too much. Too good. "Why would you do that?" she demanded. "You don't know me. You don't owe me anything. I owe justice to my people." Theron's voice hardened. 11 people are dead because someone in my court is a traitor, a poisoner, a snake wearing a friendly face. His hands clenched at his sides. My father trusted his counsel implicitly. He died with a knife in his back during a war that should never have happened. A war started by false intelligence fed to him by someone he trusted. Aelith saw it then. The grief beneath the iron. The rage beneath the calm. "You think the same person killed your father?" "I think the rot runs deeper than anyone realizes." His eyes met hers. "And I think you're the only one who can see it." She should refuse. Every survival instinct screamed at her to stay small, stay hidden, and stay safe in her cell, where at least the dangers were known. But another part of her, the part that had watched her mother burn, that had screamed warnings no one believed, that had spent 3 years drowning in silence, that part wanted to burn the world right back. "If I see something," Aelith said slowly, "and I tell you, and you don't like the answer, what then? What if it's someone you love? Someone you trust?" Theron didn't hesitate. "Then I'll deal with them. Even if it destroys you?" "The truth is already destroying me." His voice dropped, raw and honest in a way that made her chest ache. "At least this way, I'll know who to blame." Aelith studied him, this king who had walked into her cell and offered her everything she'd lost. He could be lying. He could be using her. He could throw her back in chains the moment she became inconvenient. But when she looked into his eyes, she didn't see death. She saw exhaustion, loneliness, a man carrying a crown that was slowly crushing him. "I want it in writing," she said. "The pardon, the gold, the public declaration, signed before I leave the cell. Done. And I want a room with a window, a real window." The corner of his mouth twitched. Anything else? I want your word, not as a king, as a man, that when this is over, you'll let me walk away. No tricks, no sudden accusations, no convenient disappearances. Theron extended his hand. You have my word, Aelith, as a man, not a king. 14 days, and you're free. She looked at his hand, broad, calloused, scarred across the knuckles, the hand of a warrior, not just a ruler. When her fingers touched his, something sparked. Not pain, not a vision, something else entirely. A jolt of recognition that shot through her blood and settled deep in her bones. Her breath caught. His grip tightened, and she saw his eyes widen, just slightly, before the mask slid back into place. What was that? She whispered. Theron released her hand, his jaw rigid. Nothing. A trick of the damp air. He was lying. She knew it as surely as she knew her own name. But before she could press, he turned toward the door. We leave within the hour. I suggest you prepare yourself. He was gone before she could ask what, exactly, she was supposed to prepare for. The world outside the prison was painfully bright. Aelith squinted against the gray sky, her eyes burning from 3 years of darkness. The marshlands stretched around them, endless and bleak. But even this desolate landscape felt overwhelming after so long within stone walls. A man in dark leathers waited beside 4 horses. He was broad-shouldered and watchful, with copper skin and a shaved head marked by ritual scars. When he saw Aelith, his expression remained carefully neutral. This is Corvin, Theron said. My shield captain. He'll be responsible for your safety. My safety, or making sure I don't run? Corvin's mouth curved slightly. Both, my lady. She wasn't a lady. She was a prisoner in borrowed clothes, a simple traveling dress one of the guards had produced, brown wool that itched against her skin. But she didn't correct him. They rode for hours. Aelith's thighs screamed from the unfamiliar motion, her body weak from years of confinement. But she didn't complain. She watched the marshlands give way to rolling hills, then dense forest, then farmland dotted with villages. As the sun began to set, the capital rose before them. Valanthor. The city sprawled across a river delta, its buildings climbing the hills like stacked stones, and at its heart, dominating the skyline, stood the Obsidian Keep, a fortress of black rock that seemed to drink the fading light. Home, Theron said, his voice flat. Aelith heard what he didn't say. Prison of a different kind. Inside the keep, everything changed. Servants appeared from nowhere, bowing and murmuring and ushering her through corridors lined with tapestries worth more than her entire village. The floors were polished marble. The walls held torches that burned without smoke. A woman named Mira, middle-aged, soft-spoken, with kind eyes, showed her to a room that made Aelith stop in the doorway. There was a bed. A real bed, with pillows and furs and sheets that looked like clouds. There was a fireplace, already crackling with warmth. And there was a window. Aelith crossed the room and pressed her palm against the glass. The city glittered below, thousands of lights flickering to life as darkness fell. She could see the river, black and silver under the rising moon. She could see the sky, vast and endless and free. His Majesty said you're to have anything you need. Mira said gently, there's a bath being prepared and I'll bring food shortly. After she left, Aelith stood at the window for a long time. She should be planning, strategizing, preparing for whatever nightmare awaited her in Theron's court. Instead, she watched the moon rise and let herself feel something she hadn't felt in 3 years. Hope. It terrified her. The next morning, Aelith learned what it meant to see death in a king's court. Theron came for her at dawn, his face unreadable. Council meeting in an hour. I need you to watch. Don't speak unless I ask you to. Just observe. The council chamber was a circular room with a domed ceiling painted to look like the night sky. 12 chairs surrounded a central table, and in those chairs sat the most powerful people in Valdren. Aelith stood in the shadows near the door, Corvin a silent presence beside her, and watched. Lord Harwick, elderly, silver-haired, with the soft hands of a man who'd never held a weapon. When his eyes met hers briefly across the room, she saw nothing. Just the fog of a distant death, years away, unremarkable. Lady Seren, young, ambitious, with a smile that never touched her eyes. Death circled her, but not her own. She would cause it. Soon. Aelith's stomach clenched. She filed the information away. The spy master's death was shrouded in shadows she couldn't penetrate. The foreign ambassador's fate was tangled with his homeland's, but it was the last counselor who made her blood freeze. Lord Vesrin, young, handsome, with auburn hair and an easy charm. He sat at Theron's right hand, laughing at something the king said, his posture relaxed and familiar. When his eyes found Aelith's, the vision hit her like a hammer. Theron gasping, blood spreading across white sheets, a knife with a bone handle buried in his chest. And standing over him, face twisted with triumph, Aelith wrenched her gaze away, her heart slamming against her ribs. "Are you all right?" Corvin murmured. "Fine." The word came out strangled. "I'm fine." She wasn't fine. She'd just seen the Alpha King's murder, and the man who would do it was sitting 3 feet away from him, smiling like a brother. After the council dispersed, Theron led her to his private study, a room lined with books and maps, smelling of leather and ink. He closed the door and turned to face her. "Tell me." Aelith's hands were shaking. She pressed them flat against her thighs, trying to still them. "Lord Vesrin." Theron went very still. "What about him?" "I saw—" Her voice faltered. She forced herself to continue. "I saw him standing over your body. There was a knife. You were—" She couldn't say it. The death was close. Days, maybe. A week at most. Silence. When she finally looked up, Theron's face was unreadable, but his eyes were devastated. "Vesrin is my cousin," he said quietly. "We were raised together. He's been my closest friend since childhood. I'm sorry." "Are you certain? Could you be wrong?" Aelith thought of her mother, of Lord Brennick, of every vision she'd ever had that came true despite her desperate prayers for them to be false. "I've never been wrong." Theron turned away, bracing his hands on his desk. His shoulders were rigid, his breathing carefully controlled. She watched him struggle with something she understood intimately, the weight of knowing something you wished you didn't. "He stood beside me at my father's funeral," Theron said, his voice hollow. "He held my mother's hand while she wept. He saved my life in battle 3 times. And now he's going to take it." Theron's fist slammed against the desk. The sound made her flinch, but she didn't retreat. "Why?" he demanded. "What could he possibly gain?" "The throne." Aelith spoke softly. "If you die without an heir, who inherits?" Theron's head dropped. "He does." The answer hung between them, poisonous and undeniable. After a long moment, Theron straightened. When he turned to face her, the vulnerability was gone, replaced by something harder. "You'll tell no one what you saw?" "Not yet. I need proof before I can act." "And if he moves first?" "He won't. I'll make sure of it." His gaze locked onto hers. "Thank you, Aelith. I know that wasn't easy." "Telling someone they're going to be murdered by their best friend?" She laughed bitterly. "No, it wasn't." He moved toward her, stopping close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from him. "You could have lied. Could have told me you saw nothing, taken your freedom, and disappeared." "I could have." "Why didn't you?" Aelith met his eyes and told him the truth. "Because I've been the person no one believed. I won't make someone else feel that way." Something cracked in his expression. For a moment, he wasn't a king. He was just a man, tired and betrayed and desperately alone. His hand lifted, hesitated, and then gently brushed a strand of hair from her face. The touch was feather-light, barely there, But it sent that same spark shooting through her, the one from the prison, the one neither of them had acknowledged. "You're not what I expected," he murmured. "Neither are you." They stood there, suspended in a moment that felt fragile as glass. Then Corvin knocked on the door and the moment shattered. Theron stepped back, his mask sliding firmly into place. "Come in." "Your Majesty." Corvin's expression was grim. "There's been another death. Lord Harwick was found in his chambers an hour ago. Poison." Aelith felt the blood drain from her face. Lord Harwick, the elderly counselor whose death she'd seen as distant, years away. She'd been wrong. She was never wrong. Unless someone had changed the timeline. Unless the killer was moving faster now, adjusting plans, eliminating threats. Unless they knew she was here. Theron's eyes met hers, and she saw her own horror reflected back. "It's beginning," he said quietly. "Whatever game Vesrin is playing, he's accelerating." "Because of me," Aelith whispered. "He knows. Somehow, he knows." Theron's jaw clenched. "Then we'll just have to be faster." He strode toward the door, pausing only to look back at her. "Stay close to me, Aelith. From now on, you don't leave my sight." It should have felt like another prison. Instead, as she followed him into the corridor, it felt like the only safe place left in the world. 3 days passed in a blur of tension and stolen glances. Aelith shadowed Theron everywhere. Council meetings, diplomatic dinners, even training sessions where she watched him spar with his warriors, his body moving with lethal grace that made her mouth go dry. She told herself it was professional observation. She was looking for threats, watching for danger, doing the job she'd been brought here to do. But that didn't explain why her eyes kept finding him across crowded rooms, why her skin prickled whenever he stood too close, why that spark between them seemed to grow stronger every day. Vesrin remained close to Theron, playing the loyal cousin with sickening perfection. Aelith had to watch them laugh together, share meals together, while knowing what lurked behind that charming smile. It made her stomach turn. On the 4th night, she couldn't sleep. She found herself wandering the keep's corridors, eventually climbing a narrow staircase to the highest tower. The wind hit her face as she emerged onto the battlements, cold and clean and smelling of rain. Theron was already there. He stood at the edge, staring out at the city below, his cloak whipping around him. When he heard her footsteps, he turned. "Couldn't sleep?" he asked. "Too many ghosts." She joined him at the wall. "You?" "Same." He was quiet for a moment. "I keep thinking about Vesrin, running through every memory, every conversation, trying to find the moment he decided to betray me. Maybe there wasn't one moment. Maybe it was 1,000 small ones. That's worse. That means I missed 1,000 chances to see the truth." Aelith looked at him, really looked. The moonlight carved shadows beneath his cheekbones, made his eyes gleam like polished steel. He looked exhausted, haunted, beautiful in a way that made her chest ache. "You trusted him because he earned it," she said softly. "That's not a weakness. It might get me killed." "It won't. I won't let it." Theron turned to face her fully. "Why do you care? You could do your 14 days, take your gold, and forget I ever existed." "I could." She held his gaze. "But I won't." "Why?" The question hung between them. Aelith knew she should deflect, should armor herself the way she'd learned to do. But something about this moment, the darkness, the wind, the raw honesty in his eyes, stripped her defenses away. "Because you believed me," she whispered, "when no one else did. Do you know how long I've waited for someone to just believe me?" Theron moved closer, slow and deliberate, giving her time to retreat. She didn't. "I've been trying very hard not to do this," he said, his voice low. "To keep my distance. To remember that you're here because I asked you to be, not because you chose it. I chose to stay. You chose freedom. I'm just the path to it. Maybe you were. Aelith reached up, her fingers trembling as they brushed his jaw. Maybe that's changing. His breath caught. His hand came up to cover hers, pressing her palm flat against his cheek. Aelith. Her name was a prayer on his lips. If I kiss you right now, I don't think I'll be able to stop. Then don't stop. He kissed her like a man drowning, his hands cupping her face, his mouth hungry and desperate against hers. She melted into him, fisting her hands in his cloak, pulling him closer until there was no space left between them. The bond. Because that's what it was, she realized now. That spark, that recognition, flared bright and fierce, weaving them together in ways she didn't fully understand. When they finally broke apart, both gasping, Theron pressed his forehead to hers. This complicates things, he murmured. I know. I still have to let you go, after the 14 days. That was our deal. Aelith pulled back to look at him. And if I don't want to go? Hope flickered in his eyes. Then I would ask you to stay. Not as a prisoner. Not as a tool. As my equal. My partner. He paused. My mate. Ask me again, she said softly. After Vesrin is dealt with. After we survive whatever's coming. Ask me then, and I'll give you my answer. Theron kissed her forehead, soft and sweet. I can wait. Drop a comment if you're rooting for them. She smiled against his chest. Don't get too confident. Wouldn't dream of it. They stood wrapped in each other until the sky began to lighten, and for the first time since her mother died, Aelith let herself believe in something more than survival. The next morning, everything shattered. Aelith woke to Mira shaking her shoulder, the older woman's face pale with fear. You need to come with me. Now. Don't speak. Don't argue. Just come. She was led through servant passages she hadn't known existed, down into the bowels of the keep where the air grew cold and damp. Corvin waited in a small chamber lit by a single torch, his expression grim. What's happening? Aelith demanded. Vesrin made his move. Corvin's voice was tight. He went to the council this morning, accused you of witchcraft, said you've been manipulating the king with dark magic, that you're responsible for Lord Harwick's death. The blood drained from her face. That's insane. Theron knows. Theron has been confined to his chambers. The council voted to investigate the claims. Until they reach a verdict, you're to be held in the dungeons. No. She'd been here before. Accused. Imprisoned. Forgotten. The walls seemed to close in around her, her breath coming fast and shallow. I won't go back to a cell. Her voice shook. I can't. Corvin gripped her shoulders, forcing her to meet his eyes. Listen to me. Theron is fighting for you. He's demanding a hearing, threatening to dissolve the council entirely if they don't see reason. But Vesrin has been planning this for months. He has allies, evidence, witnesses who'll say whatever he pays them to say. Then it's over. The words tasted like ash. He's won. Not yet. Corvin released her, his jaw set. Theron sent me to get you out. There's a passage that leads beyond the city walls. You can run, disappear, start over somewhere Vesrin will never find you. Aelith stared at him. And Theron. He'll face the consequences. Vesrin will probably challenge him for the throne. There'll be a trial by combat, or an assassination made to look like an accident. Corvin's voice was flat, hiding the grief beneath. Either way, he doesn't expect to survive. Then I'm not leaving. Aelith. I said no. She straightened, something hardening inside her. I've spent my whole life running, hiding, letting other people decide whether I live or die. She thought of her mother, burning, of her father, dying alone while she rotted in a cell, of Theron, offering her freedom while fully expecting to lose everything. I'm done running. Corvin studied her for a long moment. Then, slowly, he smiled. Good, because Theron thought you'd say that. He pulled a small blade from his belt and pressed it into her hand. He also said to give you this, and to tell you that if you're determined to fight, then fight smart. What's the plan? Vesrin's hosting a feast tonight to celebrate his victory. The entire court will be there, including Theron under guard. Corvin's eyes glittered. Vesrin is arrogant. He thinks he's already won. That means he'll get careless. You want me to crash a feast where everyone thinks I'm a witch? I want you to prove you're not. And I want you to expose Vesrin for what he really is, in front of everyone who matters. Aelith looked at the blade in her hand. It was small, easily concealed, and sharp enough to kill. If this fails, she said quietly, we all die. Then let's not fail. She tucked the blade into her sleeve and met Corvin's gaze. Take me to Theron. The servants' passages led to a hidden door behind a tapestry in Theron's chambers. Aelith slipped through to find him pacing like a caged wolf, 2 guards stationed at his main door. When he saw her, the relief on his face nearly broke her. You're supposed to be running. His voice was rough. I told Corvin to get you out. And I told him no. She crossed the room and took his hands. I'm not leaving you to die. Aelith, don't. She squeezed his fingers hard. You gave me a choice. Now I'm making it. I choose to stay. I choose to fight. I choose you. His composure shattered. He pulled her against him, holding her so tight she could barely breathe, his face buried in her hair. If anything happens to you, it won't. We have a plan. We have a desperate gamble. Same thing. She pulled back, forcing a smile she didn't quite feel. Tell me you trust me. With my life. Then trust me tonight. I can end this. I can prove what Vesrin is. But I need you to play along, no matter what happens. Can you do that? Theron cupped her face, his thumbs brushing her cheekbones. What are you planning? Something dangerous. She turned her head, pressing a kiss to his palm. Something that might destroy me. But if it works, it'll save you. Save everyone. That's not an answer. It's the only one I have. He kissed her then. Hard and desperate, like he was trying to memorize the taste of her. When he pulled back, his eyes were fierce. After tonight, I'm never letting you out of my sight again. Promise? On my life. On everything I am. She laughed despite everything. I'll hold you to that. The sun was setting outside the window, painting the sky in shades of fire. In a few hours, they would walk into a den of enemies and gamble everything on a single moment. Aelith had never been more terrified. She'd also never been more certain. Let's end this. Stay till the end. You won't see this coming. The feast hall blazed with light. Hundreds of candles reflected off gilded walls, crystal goblets, and the jewels dripping from noble throats. Music played from somewhere unseen, a bright melody that clashed with the tension coiled in Aelith's gut. She slipped in through the servants' entrance, dressed in borrowed finery, a deep green gown that Mira had produced from somewhere, her hair pinned up with silver combs. She looked like a lady. She felt like an imposter. Theron sat at the high table, flanked by guards, his expression carved from ice. Vesrin lounged beside him, laughing too loudly, playing the gracious host. When his eyes swept the room and landed on Aelith, his smile faltered for just a moment. Then it widened. Guards! His voice cut through the music. The witch has escaped. Seize her! The hall erupted into chaos. Nobles screamed, guards lunged forward, and Aelith stood perfectly still in the center of it all. Wait! Her voice was calm, carrying further than it should. Lord Vesrin, surely you'll give me the chance to answer your accusations? Or is the Alpha King's court no longer interested in truth? Murmurs rippled through the crowd. The guards hesitated, looking to Vesrin. He smiled, all charm and venom. By all means, let the witch speak before she burns. Aelith walked forward, moving through the crowd like water through stones. She could feel their fear, their hatred, and their morbid curiosity. She ignored it all. She stopped in front of the high table, her eyes locked on Vesrin. You accuse me of witchcraft, of manipulating the king, of murdering Lord Harwick. She tilted her head. But I wonder, if I truly had such powers, why would I use them against an old man who posed no threat to anyone? Misdirection, Vesrin said smoothly. To conceal your true target. And what would that be? The king, obviously. You've bewitched him, turned him against his own family. Family. Aelith latched onto the word. How touching. Tell me, Lord Vesrin, how is it that you know so much about my supposed crimes? How did you know to search my room for evidence before anyone else suspected me? The first flicker of unease crossed his face. I received information. From whom? Who told you exactly where to look? Who told you exactly what to accuse me of? She stepped closer. Or did you already know because you planted it yourself? The murmurs grew louder. Vesrin's smile hardened. Desperate lies from a desperate woman. Then prove me wrong. Aelith stepped closer, holding his gaze. Look into my eyes, Lord Vesrin. Hold my stare for 10 seconds. If I'm the witch you claim, you have nothing to fear. But if I'm telling the truth... She let the implication hang. Vesrin laughed, but it sounded forced. I won't submit to your dark rituals. Why not? Theron's voice rang out cold and commanding. If you're innocent, you have nothing to fear. The hall went silent. Vesrin's eyes darted between Theron and Aelith, calculating, weighing his options. He was trapped, and he knew it. Refusing would look like guilt. Agreeing risked exposure. Fine. He stood, straightening his coat. Let the witch stare into my eyes. When she sees nothing, I expect a public execution. He stepped forward until they were face to face. Aelith met his gaze and held it. The vision hit her like a thunderbolt. Vesrin, younger, kneeling before a shadowed figure. Kill the king, the figure says. Take the throne. I'll give you everything you want. Vesrin smiles. Consider it done? Vesrin, pouring powder into a goblet. Lord Harwick drinking, choking, dying. Vesrin, standing over Theron's sleeping form, knife raised. Aelith stumbled back, gasping. He killed Lord Harwick. Her voice rang through the hall. He's been planning to kill the king. He made a deal with someone, a shadow figure I couldn't see, to take the throne. Vesrin's face contorted with rage. Lies. She's lying. Then explain this. Corvin stepped forward, holding a small vial. We found this in your chambers an hour ago. Nightshade extract. Enough to kill 20 men. He produced a leather journal. And this. Your own handwriting. Detailing every payment to the assassins you've hired, every bribe you've made, every death you've planned. The hall exploded. Vesrin lunged for Aelith, a hidden blade flashing in his hand. But Theron was faster. Launching himself over the table, tackling his cousin to the ground with a snarl that was more wolf than man. They struggled, rolled, and then Theron was on top, his hand pressed hard around Vesrin's throat. You killed them. Theron's voice was barely human. My friends, my allies, you would have killed me. You were never worthy of the throne, Vesrin spat. Too soft, too trusting. Father would have... Your father was a traitor too. Theron leaned closer. I found the letters. He helped plan the war that killed my parents. Vesrin's eyes widened. Then he laughed. A broken, bitter sound. Then finish it, cousin. Prove you're the monster you need to be. Theron's hand trembled. For a terrible moment, Aelith thought he would do it. Would crush his cousin's throat right there in front of everyone. No. Theron released him, standing. You'll stand trial. You'll answer for your crimes. And then, you'll hang like the traitor you are. Guards swarmed forward, dragging Vesrin away. His screams echoed through the hall long after he disappeared. Theron turned to face the court, his chest heaving, and blood on his knuckles. The witch accusation is false, he announced. This woman saved my life. Saved all of you. Anyone who disputes this can take it up with me personally. No one spoke. Theron extended his hand to Aelith. She took it, and the hall erupted into uncertain applause. It was over. The days that followed were a blur of trials and revelations. Vezrin confessed under questioning, naming co-conspirators, revealing the full scope of his betrayal. The shadow figure from Aelith's vision remained unidentified, a problem for another day, but the immediate threat was neutralized. Lord Harwick's true killer was brought to justice. The council was purged of Vezrin's allies. And slowly, the court began to accept that the woman who had arrived in chains might be something other than a monster. On the 14th day, Aelith found Theron in his study. He looked up when she entered, and something flickered across his face. Hope and fear intertwined. "It's been 14 days," he said quietly. "I know. The pardon is signed. The gold is waiting." He gestured to a chest on his desk. "Your name has been cleared publicly. You're free to go wherever you want." Aelith approached the desk, running her fingers along the edge of the chest. More gold than she'd ever seen. Enough to buy a house, start a business, build a life somewhere far from courts and politics and death. "Is that what you want?" she asked. "For me to go?" Theron was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was rough. "I want you to be happy. Whatever that looks like. Even if it's not with me." "And if happiness looks like staying?" He went very still. Aelith turned to face him. "I spent 3 years in a cell, dreaming of freedom. Dreaming of starting over somewhere no one knew my name." She moved closer. "But you know what I never dreamed of? This. Someone who sees what I am and doesn't flinch. Someone who believes me. Someone who makes me feel like maybe I'm not cursed after all." "Aelith, ask me." She took his hands. "You said you'd ask me after it was over. So ask." Theron's fingers laced through hers. His eyes searched her face, looking for doubt, for hesitation, finding none. "Stay with me," his voice cracked. "Not as a guest, not as an ally, as my mate, my queen. Stay and let me spend the rest of my life proving you made the right choice." "Yes." He blinked. "Yes?" "Yes to all of it." She laughed, tears streaming down her cheeks. The staying, the mate bond, the terrifying prospect of being queen. All of it. Theron kissed her like she was oxygen and he'd been drowning his whole life. His arms wrapped around her, lifting her off her feet, spinning her until they were both dizzy and laughing. "I love you," he breathed against her lips. "I think I loved you from the moment you called me rude in that cell. I love you too." She pressed her forehead to his. "Even though you're still rude sometimes. I prefer direct." "You would." He set her down but didn't let go, his hands framing her face like she was something precious. "We're going to have to tell the court." "I know. They'll hate it. A former prisoner as queen. The scandal will be legendary." "Good." Aelith grinned. "I've always wanted to be legendary." Theron laughed. A real laugh. Full and bright. The sound of a man who'd finally set down a weight he'd been carrying too long. "Then let's give them something to talk about." The bonding ceremony was held under the winter moon. Aelith wore silver silk that caught the light like starfire. Theron wore black and gold, a crown on his head, and something like wonder in his eyes. The entire court watched as they spoke their vows, promises of partnership, choice, and love freely given. "I choose you," Theron said. "Not because of prophecy or politics, because you are brave and fierce and you see the truth in everyone, including me. You made me better. You saved me." "I choose you," Aelith answered. "Not because you freed me from a cell, but because you freed me from myself. You believed in me when I'd stopped believing. You're the home I never thought I'd find." When they kissed, the bond snapped fully into place. Not a cage, but a bridge, connecting them while leaving room for each to stand alone. The celebration lasted until dawn. Later, much later, they escaped to their chambers. The fire crackled low, casting dancing shadows across the walls. They lay tangled together, her head on his chest, his fingers tracing lazy patterns on her shoulder. "Tell me something," Theron murmured. "Something I don't know." Aelith thought for a moment. "When I first saw you in that cell, I was furious." "Furious?" "You were so calm, so certain, walking into a prison like you owned it, which you did, and looking at me like I was the answer to everything." She tilted her head to meet his eyes. "I wanted to hate you for it, and now I understand. You weren't certain. You were desperate. Just better at hiding it than most." Theron was quiet for a moment. "You want to know what I thought? When I first saw you? Tell me." "I thought you looked like someone who'd survived things that should have destroyed her." His arms tightened around her. "I thought you were the most dangerous person in that prison." "I was right. Just not in the way I expected." Aelith smiled. "Dangerous?" "To my peace of mind, to my carefully constructed walls, to every plan I'd made for my life." He rolled over, pinning her beneath him, his eyes soft with love. "You ruined everything, Aelith, and I've never been more grateful." She pulled him down for a kiss that said everything words couldn't. Outside, the city celebrated. Music drifted up from the streets, mingled with laughter and distant fireworks. Aelith thought about the woman she'd been 14 days ago, trapped in a cell, convinced she'd die forgotten, certain that her gift was a curse that would only ever bring her pain. That woman wouldn't recognize her now. She was a queen, a mate, a woman who had faced death and chosen to fight. And it had all started with a single moment. Every prisoner was pardoned until the Alpha King stopped at her cell. "She stays," he'd said. And she had. Not because she was forced to. Not because she had no other choice, but because somewhere between the accusations and the visions and the desperate kisses on moonlit battlements, she'd found something worth staying for. "What are you thinking about?" Theron asked. "The day we met, you could have just taken what you needed. Dragged me to the capital in chains, used my gift, and thrown me away. Why didn't you?" Theron considered the question. "Because you deserved better. And because some part of me knew. You weren't just a means to an end. You were the end itself." Aelith felt tears prick her eyes. "You're getting poetic." "Blame the queen. She's been a terrible influence." She laughed, and he caught the sound with a kiss. Outside, the first light of dawn painted the sky in shades of rose and gold. A new day, a new beginning. Aelith had walked into the obsidian keep expecting chains. Instead, she'd found freedom, love, and a king who had looked at a prisoner and seen a queen. "Fair trade," she whispered against his lips. He held her close as the sun rose, and the bond between them hummed with quiet contentment. She'd been pardoned not by the king's decree, but by love itself. And she was finally, completely home. Where are you listening from? Let's meet in the comments, and if you'd like to support me, please subscribe. It's free, and it helps more people hear these stories.